Hey guys, how's it going? Hope everyone's doing well. Hope you had a good weekend. So, I'm doing another live coding session where I'm going to create a new application for a simple link sharing website where I will be able to post links on my own page and my friends will be able to see what links I posted and be able to click on whatever looks interesting. It's kind of like a personal Reddit board if you want to look at it that way. So this is going to be a new project starting from scratch on Turbo 360. And I'm going to use React, Redux, Node Express, all that stuff. If you're not familiar with these live coding sessions that I do from time to time, it's not really an instructional video, although I do try to explain as much as I can. It's more like just coding in front of somebody, not quite real time, simply because I have to keep things slow for the video, but it's not meant to be instructional, so I don't go through every single detail. However, if you do ask questions in the chat, I don't mind stopping and answering, so feel free to do that. And as I go through the live coding, I'll try to explain at a surface level what I'm doing. So if you're new to Turbo, first thing you want to do is make sure you have all the proper tools installed. So we're going to need Node. Make sure you have Node and then npm. So these are the versions of Node and npm that I'm currently running. Make sure you have Webpack installed. So sudo npm install and then Webpack global. Actually, you want to install this Webpack CLI. That's a recent change that they made. So go ahead and do this if you don't already have the Webpack CLI installed. Also, if you're using Windows, you do not need the sudo. So if you're on a Windows machine, ignore the sudo command. Okay, and then you're also going to need sudo npm install gulp globally as well. We're going to use these tools today in our project. Same thing, if you're operating on a Windows machine, do not install using sudo. Just do regular npm install, and you should be all set to go. And last but not least, make sure you have the Turbo CLI. So sudo npm install Turbo CLI. And make sure, globally, and make sure you have the most recent version installed, which as of the recording of this video is that. So make sure you have that version number or higher, and you should be good to go. If you do not have Node and npm, here's where you can find that. So just download the LTS and install that. It normally takes like 2 minutes. It's pretty fast to get through all that installation. And once you have all that, you should be set to go. That should be everything. I don't think I left anything out. So that should be good to go. So go ahead and make sure you have those things properly installed. Let me just get this going on my desktop. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and head over to our desktop, and I'm going to create my project here. You can obviously do it wherever you want to. So I'm going to do Turbo, new link. Just call it links, that's fine. So again, the idea behind the application is to make it easy for me to share whatever links that I find interesting, and also to see what my friends find interesting, and I can see what they're watching, what pages they visited that day, and kind of what they think is cool that day. It's like your own personal like Reddit feed, so you can think of it that way. So I am going to use React Redux, so go ahead and install. Actually, let me show you a new feature I built into Turbo. So I'm going to do new links and then cd into the links directory that should be created in your workspace, and then run npm install. Again, I'm going to go a little bit faster than a normal tutorial because this is just meant to be more of a coding demonstration. So normally I would explain everything that's going on here, but I'm just going to go through it at my own speed right now. So if this is already, you're lost at this point, just head over to my website, turbo360.co, and just check out the tutorials, and you'll see a lot of beginner tutorials here that'll help you get started. Okay, so this is done installing the dependencies. I'm going to run the dev server just to make sure that the installation worked. Head over to localhost 3000, make sure the installation worked. So we're good to go on that. I'm going to head over to Turbo now and log in. I think I'm already logged in. Yep. And I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call it link. Same name, links, link sharing Web application. Let's go ahead and create that project. Grab the app ID so I can connect it to my local source. And then turbo app, connect it over here. And then turbo deploy. And let's make sure that that works. All right, should be done in a few seconds. Alrighty, and then let's head over to the staging URL and make sure that the deployment worked. All right, everything checks out. So now we are good to go. So let's run the dev server again, and then let's head back to localhost 3000. Let's open up the code in our editor. I'm going to use Sublime. I'm using Sublime. And here is the code base that's originally scaffolded. Here we have our app, our Express instantiation, and we're connecting our routes. And inside of our routes directory, we have our sample routes, our index, and our API, and that's it. Now, I did say earlier I want to make this a React Redux project, so I built in a new feature where you can add a React Redux source code base, scaffolded code base, if you change your mind down the road. So let's say you create a simple project like this, like we did right here, and then we decide later on down the road we want to add a React Redux code base. So I created a new function in the Turbo CLI called extend, and then you can just do React, and it'll install a React Redux code base. So I guess you can call this extensions or something like that. So it's currently doing that. It's going to run the build scripts as well, just to make sure the build is successful. And this is why we needed to install Gulp and Webpack early on, because of this right here, so that when these scripts run, there's no problem at the system level. So this will take another couple seconds. It's going to run Webpack next. And once this is done, we can confirm that we have a React Redux code base installed in our project after the initial scaffold. So like I said, that's a new feature on Turbo that I just added, where you can add a React Redux code base to your project even if you didn't originally scaffold it with one. So here the Webpack is running right now. It's running the build on Webpack. That is now done. And then it's just going to run the quick Gulp build. And then we can now run the dev server and make sure that that still works. Turbo dev server, excuse me. Head back to localhost. It's going to look the same, but now we're running a React Redux source code. And then you can see here we have the React Redux environment installed. So we extended our project to now run React Redux. So we're good to go. So that's a nice little thing. If you create a project and then change your mind down the road that you want to add React Redux, you can just do that after the fact and it's all good. All right, great. So we're good to go with that. So first thing I'm going to do is define a couple resources. We're going to have a profile resource, right, as most applications do. And then we're also going to have, I think that's going to be it for now, actually, just a profile resource and maybe a link resource. Yeah, we'll call it a link resource. We'll call those the two resources. So I'm going to approach this project a little bit differently, and I'm going to build out the backend stuff first. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to further extend the project to include a REST API. And the REST API extension will give us a very basic REST API architecture, in addition to the Mongoose schemas for profile, and that's it. And then you can take it from there. You can add your own stuff. So I'm going to do turbo extend and then API. Now this is going to give me an API backend. So here you'll see we have now models and controllers. And inside the models and controllers, we have a profile model, which is a very, very basic profile, email, password, and timestamp, and that's it. So naturally, we're going to want to extend this. And then we have the controller, which handles all the CRUD operations for the profile model resource, excuse me. And then inside the API route, the endpoints are already set up for us. Now, this assumes a Mongo database integration, so we have to actually configure that now just to make sure it doesn't break on the API requests. So if we go to app.js, here's where we can do that. We want to set the DB integration right here. So I am going to comment this out, and I'm going to include the config. Actually, I'm going to use the express initializer right here. Okay. Great. Now what we have here is the MongoDB integration configuration, excuse me. So what we're going to do here is we're going to define a MongoDB URI for the local, so env, and then let's go down here, MongoDB URI, and that's going to be a local MongoDB instance. So MongoDB localhost, and then the name of the application. So I guess we're calling it links, right? So let's just go with that. So that's going to be our local. So we are good to go with that. And the environment is going to be dev right here. So we don't need to worry about the production yet. So what we need to make sure about now is that we have our Mongo instance running side by side the web server. So if I open a new tab in the terminal, I can run the Mongo instance, the local Mongo instance. Okay, good to go. And now I can run the dev server here and make sure that the connection, the Mongo connection, is successfully integrated. So DB successfully connected, DB successfully connected. We are good to go with that. So now we can start making API requests against our REST API. So we have API profile. Obviously, we don't have any profiles, so it's an empty array. We can check a unique identifier. All of this is set to go. And it's doing it against this profile resource right here and using this controller for the CRUD operations. So right now I'm making pretty heavy use of the extend command on the CLI to just build out the project, build out some initial functionality so I don't have to build things from the bottom up over and over and over again. But now that we have this API stuff all set to go, I'm going to create a new resource called link. Go ahead and do that. So we want to cd into the models and then create a link resource. And then I'm going to copy and paste from the profile resource into the link resource. And then obviously change name. And a link is going to have a URL, a profile associated with it, and we'll just leave that as a string for now, and then a timestamp. And for now, that'll be it. We're not going to go much further than that. Down the road, we're probably going to continue extending this out, though. This will probably not be the only thing we do with it. Same with the profile. We're probably going to build this out a little bit more, add like an image and a bio and things of that sort. So, but for now, we're just getting things set up. So the next thing we want to do is create a link controller. So head over to the controllers and create a link controller. And then just like before, we're going to copy and paste the profile controller into the link controller and just change the names of the of this right here. So links. Okay, just 2 more to go. Oops. And last one. Just do a quick check to make sure I didn't leave any profile references behind, and I don't think I did. I think we're good to go. So now we're going to head over to the index file in the controller and then export the link controller so we can use that in the API route. All right, and then let's head over to the API route. And all the controllers are exported here, so we don't need to do anything different now. We can just test it out. So let's try the links endpoint. So if I'm going to restart the dev server. All right, and then let's try the links endpoint. Great. Okay, so the link resource was connected, so that's good to go. So now we have profile and link, and for now that's going to be it. I think that should be good to go. So we have enough to get started building out the actual client side to register a profile and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and get that started. So I'm going to do this in a slightly different order than I normally do. I'm going to build out the UI with no theme integration, and then I'm going to build in a theme later on, just so I can try a different route. So let's see here. I'm going to head over to here and then run the dev server. Excuse me. And then head back to the home page of our project. And here we are. Okay, so now what we're looking at is the index.mustache. And this, of course, is a React entry point. So what that means is that this bundle app.js and this bundle commons is what's actually running the React code. So that if we head over to our SRC and look at the index.js, this is where we're actually getting the entry point. Right, so if we get rid of that, what we're actually looking at is this intro component right here, which is found inside this components directory, and that's all of this right here. So we don't want that. We can get rid of that, and I'm going to create a div like so, and then let's go with an h1 tag. This is the React entry point. All right, and so right now to get this to render, we need to do npm run build, because I will rerun the Webpack and the gulp scripts. So once that's done, we can re-render the home page and we should see the h1 tag. So let's try that. All right, good. So that means we now have the entry point. So let's go ahead and head over to the components directory, which has just the intro component, which we, by the way, removed. So let's just get rid of it altogether. And then let's head over to the SRC and then the components, and then let's create our own entry point component for the React project. So this is where I guess is the home page, right? So let's just call this home.js for now. So where was that? Here we go. Home.js. Yeah, a lot of this is going to change, by the way, but for now I'm just getting pieces set up. So home.js. So import React component from React, and then class home and component. Of course, we need the render, and that's going to return. And then let's see here. This is the home component. And then let's export that. All right, and then inside the index.js, we come back here and then we import home from components and then home. Actually, what I normally do is inside the components directory, I'm going to create an index. And then inside the index is where I export all the modules. So I'm going to do import home from home, and then just export this guy. That's it. And that way, inside here, I can just do this instead, like that. And that way, if I export multiple components from this directory, I can just do comma and then comma, comma, comma. Rather than have 10 lines for 10 separate components, I can just do one line for multiple components. That makes this a little bit easier. And then I'm going to render that right here. All right, let's give that a shot. I'm going to head back to the root level, and then I'm going to run the npm build script one more time. All right, let's see how that looks. This is the home component. All right, so then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a, let's see here, the best way to do this is going to be, I'm going to create subdirectories in here called containers and another one for presentation, or just containers for now. Let's just go with containers and that's it. So src, cd components, and then I'm going to make a containers directory and then cd into that, containers. And then I'm going to create the index right away. And then let's create a container for, let's see here, let's call it an auth container where users can sign up or log in and register, stuff like that. So let's just call it auth, and we'll just call that the container. And then let's go back here. Alrighty, so now we have our containers directory. And what did I do wrong? So this is good. And then the containers. All right, so I was in the wrong spot. Let's try that again. So cdsrc components, containers. There's nothing in here. All right, so let's just try that again. Okay, good. So this auth component should be in the containers directory. So I kind of messed it up. So let's just fix that right now. So let's see here. src components, and the auth container goes in there. And now we're back in business. Okay, so just make sure I didn't break anything along the way. All right, so I'm going to grab the index.js inside the containers and then import the auth module and then just export it right away. And then inside the auth module, I'm going to set up a very basic React component. I'm just going to copy it from the home and then auth. This is the auth container. Export that guy. And then inside the home component, we are going to import the auth container. Containers like that. And then inside here, we are just going to render the auth container. And that's it. So let's see how that goes. So let's run the build again. And then run the dev server. All right, and then we should see this is the auth container. So let's get that punched up and see how that looks. All right, now we're in motion. So the auth container right here. This of course is a container, which means it connects to the Redux store, right? So let's go ahead and make that connection happen. So we're going to need React. We're going to need connect from React Redux. And let's see here. I'm going to give this state. This state. All right, you'll see why in a few minutes. And then state to props. Sometimes people call this map state to props. Really up to you. Then return. And for now, returns nothing. And then what we're going to want is connect, which is a function. Take state to props, and then the actual component. And then while we're at it, we may as well do the dispatch to props as well. So dispatch to props. All right, which takes the dispatch argument. And I'm pretty sure this connect right here is an imported module like that. Right, so let's see here. Hopefully that makes sense. So what we're doing is we're importing the connect module from React Redux. This library comes installed when we did the extend command. And then down here, we're mapping the state to props and the dispatch to props, but we're not actually doing anything with it. We're just basically setting it up. And then we have our state to props, and then we're running the connect through a function right here so that our auth container is now literally connected to the React Redux store. So yeah, that's it. So let's give it a shot. If we look at the store and the reducers, we have a user reducer already connected to the store right here. So what we can do is we can test the user connection. So we can do, in the state to props, we can do user, and then state.user, which is a reference to this map right here. Right, so we can test the connection using the user reducer current properties, which is null for the current user. So I'm going to insert some data here, name, and then test, just to see if this works. So let's go ahead and test this guy out. So current user is, and then let's grab the current user. This.props.user. And then, now remember, we set the current user to a default value of test for the name. So that way we should see test show up here if this connection did in fact work. So I'm just testing the connection right now. That's all I'm really doing. So I'm just making sure the initial setup is good to go. And then once we confirm that, we're not going to actually use any of this. I'm just testing the connection, and that's it. All right, let's give it a shot. Current user is nothing. So what do we have going on here? So let's see. Okay. Current user. All right, so when I console log the current user, I'm going to run the npm run dev so that I don't have to keep on running the build from scratch. Okay, so now I can just leave this on and just, so what did I do wrong here? So there's all and current user. So what we want is to grab that key, and that's what I forgot. All right, so since I'm running npm run dev, it should have rebuilt, and then there we go. So now we're good to go. We've successfully confirmed the React Redux connection, so we're good to go on that. yeah, that's pretty much it. We can get rid of this now. And good. So let's see here. We have our user reducer, and we have a current user. I'm not going to leave this behind though, because that can be sloppy. So I'm going to then take this and then can be null, and then say in the case of null, current user equals null. And then we just say not logged in, and that should handle that case. So let's give that a shot. And that's what we want. All right, so because nobody's logged in. So let's, in the auth container, let's use this to set up a registration as well as a login form. So let's create a h3 register. Okay, name, our email password, and that should be a password input type, and then a button for sign up. All right, let's try that for now. Let's see what we got. I'll give this a class name of container. Okay, so on click, I guess register user, register is fine. So register, and then let's create the register function. And take an event, and it's probably the submit event from the form itself. So if in that case, we should prevent that from happening so that it doesn't actually submit the form. We want to capture it and then maybe do some email validation, stuff like that. So let's try that out. So register. Okay, so now when we hit that sign up button, we should just see that console login. That's it. So that's it. And then the form itself didn't submit. And that's exactly what we're going for. So that it won't like go through automatically like it's supposed, like it usually does. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and do on change handlers on these inputs, and then this update. Let's say update visitor, and it's going to be the same thing for both email and password. The update visitor function then has to be defined. Let's go ahead and do that. And this also takes an event. And let's do, the event is from the input itself. So we can just grab the event to find the characters that are being typed in. So it's target value. So then we can just see what letters are being typed in. Oh wait, no, I forgot something here. Nope, I didn't. That should be good to go. So let's try it. Okay, there's the email. There's the password. All right. So that is confirmed. So now we can add I'm going to add arguments to these update visitor functions. So it's going to be email and password, so that I know which field is being updated. So it's going to be field, or attribute is probably better. Attribute. And then here we can render the attribute. As well as the letter being typed in, like that. And then this way I can quickly just ascertain which field is being typed in. Right now you can't do that. So if I reload, I made a mistake. Value is undefined. Value of undefined. So let's see here. So target value. So this should go here. And then the attribute, I was in the wrong function the whole time, so it's right here. Okay. I was just doing all that logic in the wrong function. So let's try it again. Email. Password. All right. And this is why I test frequently all the way through. Oh, Atom, I was just literally typing in the wrong function. That was my mistake. So it's not, it wasn't a typo or anything like that. I was just literally doing the logic in the wrong function. So typical careless mistake. So that I do a lot. So let's see here. So let's see, email and password. Actually, I'm going to instantiate these with null. All right. Let's see here. So now what we need to do in the update visitor function is we need to just literally update the visitor, right? So, you know what? Actually, we don't even really need to have this in state. I'm going to put this in this visitor like that. I think this will be a better way to handle it. And do it like that. We might not even need state for this function. All right, let's see. So this visitor, and then we have the attribute, right? So we just grab that, and then we can do event target value like so. And then once we hit the register button here, we can do a console log register this visitor. All right, let's see now. Okay, so there's the email, and the password is going to be a bunch of ones. And then let's see what happens when I do this email password. All right, let's get rid of that console log. Now, a couple things we could do here. One reason I took this out of state and I just put it right in the class directly is because to avoid calling re-render if you don't have to. If I update the state over and over again, it'll call re-render. That'll make sense if I want to have these as controlled components, but right now I don't. I might change my mind on that later, but this way I at least bypass calling re-render over and over again. So that's why I made that decision. Let's see here. I'm going to change my mind here and go back to instantiating these as empty strings. And let's see, what else are we going to do here? We have this successfully console log, and let's do some quick validation. So inside the register, let's do if this visitor email length. This is why I went with an empty string instead of null. That way I can just do one check instead of two. Let's see. Please enter your email. And we'll do the same validation for password. Now, normally the validation stuff here would be a little bit more robust. I would use some sort of regular expressions function to make sure it actually was a valid email, and then I have a list of like bogus email domains that I would run it through as well. I'm not going to go through all that right now because it just seems like a lot for this video, but normally I would do that. And if I feel strongly about this project, I will eventually go back and do that. But right now I'm just sort of getting everything set up. So just understand that there's a lot more validation that can be done here that I normally would do. So now what we need to do here is actually literally register the user, right? So what we want to do next is we want to run this through an API call, which will create a new user and then return the data for that user. So let's go ahead and get that set up. So in our actions, we're going to want to, let's see, create a user. I actually have a create user sample action right here, so that's nice. So let's go ahead and grab that guy, and we have the params, and we already have the HTTP client, which has a post async call. This goes to API profile. I'm going to make this a little bit different. I'm going to say, I'm going to create a separate auth route, and then register, and then it'll call the user created constant on the way back. So the user created constant is right here, and that is registered inside the user reducer. So here I'm going to do console log, and then I'm just going to console log the action, and then I'm going to JSON stringify get rid of all this. The action data payload. So now what we need to do, if you take a look at the actions, we have an auth/register endpoint, which doesn't exist. So we need to create that and then create a handler to literally create the profile. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have, I turned off the Webpack. I'm going to turn this off and then cd into the routes. And then inside the routes folder, we only have these two, right? So we do touch auth. And then don't forget inside the app.js to import that route. Otherwise, it's just easy to like overlook stuff, right? So like if you forget this and then you do like, a couple hours of coding and then test it out, it all breaks, and that's just annoying. So, all right, so we go to our API endpoint. I'm just going to copy that and throw it into the auth endpoint just to get some code in there. And then I'm just going to like tear everything out, basically, except the post. And I'm going to leave that get behind, and then I'm going to create a test handler for the get just to make sure that this is even connected successfully. And then inside the post, we're going to need a register handler. Bearing in mind that if you go back to our actions, we're doing auth register. So here we're inside the auth route, and then inside the app.js, we set the auth route path to auth. So we are now testing the endpoint. So I'm going to just throw these two. So confirmation test, and then here I'm going to do success, and then data rec body. I'm just going to throw the parameters right back to the client side just to test it out. And that's it. So this endpoint is obviously extremely simple. So let's go ahead and run turbo dev server. Hey, dual arm. Thanks for yeah, thanks. I guess I am back. I had an extremely busy like 2 months or so. Client work is just getting crazy, and I'm trying to find more time for this. That's why I'm doing this on a weekend now. But yeah, I'll try and maintain this a little bit more consistently from now on, because to be honest, like this is more important than my client work anyway. So, but clients need work. So what are you gonna do about it? Okay, so the auth endpoint is connected. So as you can see here, that test is successful. That means this post handler should do something. So let's go ahead and test it out. So we have that successfully set up. Let's check our HTTP client to see how it's parsing the data, the payload. So the HTTP client is in here, and the post, it just resolves the body. So then let's see here. Okay, so then the entire body is going to go into the reducer callback. So the action.data. So let's see here how we set this up. HTTP post async. All right, so let's just try it and see what happens. So inside of our auth container, we're going to have the action, which is create user. Call that register user. Register user. And going back here, we have registered user, which is going to come from the dispatch actions, registered user, params, or we'll call it credentials. Okay, and then this, of course, is a function, so registered user, like that. Credentials. Okay, so let's see here. We need to import the actions. Import actions from, we are currently in the container. So if we go up one and then another one, we're in the components. One, I don't think we need to go two, we just go containers up one and then two. Yeah, we do need to go two. And then actions. There we go. So that should successfully import the actions file. Let's run the dev to make sure nothing crashes. If that import file path is wrong, it'll crash here. So we can, great. So we can confirm that right now. So let's see here, package.json, all right. Let's see here. Actions utils. Let's get rid of that turbo client. That's what's causing it. So actions utils index. This guy. Right. All right. I'm just going to remove that from the scaffold altogether. The turbo client's no longer really that important. So, okay. And then let's run the dev server. Auth test. Okay, so the component's rendering, so the file paths and the imports are successful. So then what we're going to test next is whether or not this register call right here, it's going to send the credentials to the actions registered user function. So actions registered user, and then here's where I'm kind of curious what's going to happen. So let's go ahead and test it out. So test, and then 1, 2, 3. I'm going to keep the terminal up because the server logs will show up here. So let's see what happens. And then we have register auth36. And I forgot to actually call the function. I always do that. So this.props register user, and then credentials. Now this is an async function which returns a promise. So it's going to return some data and then a catch. And then we can do some verification here as well. Data. And then catch. I'm just going to console log the error as is because it's actually not a JSON object. So let's see what happens. All right, so we're getting a clean build. Let's do it again. Test. All right, cannot read properly lowercase of null. That's line 43, and that's going to be right here. So we're getting a lowercasing issue. So let's see here. Now we have auth 43. And I don't see the actual server log running. So auth test. See, this didn't show up, right? So if I do this test and then 1, 2, 3, right? We're not getting the post log right here. That means it's not even getting to the server, right? So let's see where things are going wrong. So we are getting this registered user and then credentials, and then oh no, this is not the first live episode. IY. I used to do this more frequently in the past, like over the summer, earlier this year. But the past 2 months for me, I've been extremely busy with client work, contracting work. So I just got sort of buried with that, and I'm trying to find more time now to do these live sessions. So that's why it's right now on Sunday night. So I'm going to try and maintain this a little bit more regularly because these seem to be pretty. People seem to watch these, so. So that's it. All right, so let's head back. So here, the next thing it's doing is going to the actions, right? So actions and then register user. So we head over to the actions and then register user, and then let's see if we're getting this far. So console log and then actions test. All right, and then let's try that again. So there is the actions test, right? So it's getting that far, which means somewhere around here. So in the post async. So let's see what's going on there. Post async HTTP module. So endpoint, params, and headers. Endpoint, params, and headers. Lowercase of null. So the headers is null. Let's try this. Accept application JSON. Let's see what we get there. There we go. User reducer and then the auth 30 confirmation. So we're getting the reducer confirmation as well as the component confirmation. So they both worked. La-di-da. All right, so post and then headers. Yeah, this is what's causing the problem. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do if headers equals null. Headers, we're going to give it a default value like that of empty JSON. And let's see if we restore this to null, whether or not that'll crash it. So test, same difference. So that resolves that problem. Good to know. Now I'm going to restore this because it actually should have this header right here. So that's a little, it gives you a little bit more robust call. Yeah, I know about GraphQL. I've been using it a lot lately. It's not a matter of whether or not I'm getting into it or not. It's just a matter of finding time to create tutorials on it. I'm currently working on tutorials for that. Thanks for the suggestion. So here, let's see. So we're getting the callback here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to see how there's a success and a data block inside these callbacks, right? So I am going to check the success, right? Not a success, confirmation. Confirmation is not success. There should be two of these. I'm just going to return the state as is because nothing happened. So we just leave it. And then here we want to grab the data, which is inside the data key. So it's action.data.data. See, right now, the reason I'm going a little bit slow is I'm trying to find a way to avoid this without like overcrowding this HTTP client. Really what there should be is another client just for the API. But for now, I'm just going to live with it. So data, and then I'm going to call this payload, actually. Payload. just because it's getting a little bit too confusing. All right, and then let's try it again. All right, and then here is the user created payload right here that I was just working on. So now we're just getting the email and the password back. And then we can take that and assign it to the current user. So new state and then current user equals the payload, which is simply the user's email and password. So payload, and this will update the state. That's going to be email and password. If we go back to the auth, we want the current user email now. So in doing so, what should happen is when I sign up and I press sign up, this should be removed and be replaced with the email. So that's why now I'm entering my real email. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then that's what happened. So that's because of the reducer update. That's this right here. Okay, so now we can get rid of that. And this is now successfully connected. So let's see here. What we want to do is head back to the endpoint, the test endpoint, where we set all this up, and then we're going to actually persist the user because this registration isn't real yet, right? If we actually go to our API profile, it's still not actually there. Also, it's worth pointing out that I know GraphQL is very powerful and very, I very well understand its advantages, but my clients still don't use it. So an important thing I try to convey in all my content online is that, it's not for my own enjoyment or for my benefit. It's for what makes me most marketable to my clients. I have had one inquiry for GraphQL in about 2 years, and that was about a year ago. Since then, it's still been all REST API stuff, and I understand GraphQL is a more advanced way of doing it and a better way. I agree with you on that, but I'm more about getting the job done. I'm more about getting clients, getting paid essentially. And right now, this is what gets me paid. So, because you have to remember, most of the code I work on is legacy code that was written like at least a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And at that point, GraphQL was not anywhere near mainstream. I don't think it's even still mainstream right now. But at the time, it wasn't even like a consideration. So just about 100% of my work now consists of sort of reconfiguring old code bases, and by old I mean like a year to 2 years old, where Redux was still the thing to be doing. Um, that said, I do strongly recommend getting on GraphQL to everyone, and probably 1 to 2 years from now, that will become the de facto standard for data delivery from servers. I think it's kind of hard to say, but there's certainly a good place for GraphQL in the future, both technically and professionally. All right, so right here, we now actually want to create the profiles. So let's see, let's think of the best way to do this. We have our controllers, and the controller has a profile key, and that is simply connects to the CRUD operations for the profile resource, which we will be using post, obviously, to create. So let's go ahead and do that right now. I am running the Mongo database. Am I? Yes. All right. So let's go ahead and just run it through that guy. So let's see here. Inside of the auth route in the back end here, we're going to grab the credentials. And then we should normally validate again. So if credentials, email, here I have to be a little bit more thorough with my validation, because theoretically the client side might not be the web app. It might be something else entirely. It might be like an iPhone or something. So missing email. And here, if the email length is 0, and then again, I would normally do more thorough validation here. So I would normally do some sort of regex comparison, as well as I have a list of fake email domains that I would just run it through. But again, I just want to get through the basics right now. And then we have email and password, right? So password. Password is null. Missing password. Then okay. So some simple validation. And then let's grab the controllers profile. Now, so we're grabbing the profile controller, excuse me. And then if you look at the profile controller, we have a post command, which returns a promise, keep in mind. So it's going to be post, right? And inside the post, it takes a body, which is simply the params. So we're going to pass in the credentials. And then since that's going to be a promise, we just do then, and then catch, the usual promise sequence. And then here we get the callback data. And then this time we pass back the data from the server, the database, instead of just bouncing, boomeranging just the params back, which would be not very helpful. So here, I'm just going to do error message, and then now we can test it again, but this time it'll actually persist the profile to our MongoDB. So let's try it. So equal turbo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're getting the data back from the actual database, as you can tell from the additional keys like the ID and the timestamp, password, which we should obviously conceal. But if we take a look at the actual API endpoint now, you'll see that that the profile that I just signed up with is now there. So good, worked. All right, we're good to go. Let's just test the this guy right here, and let's try that. All right. Right. So let's see here. Now, excuse me. I'm going to do one more thing here in the auth route. I'm going to do a login route. So that's going to be a post as well. So let's do, actually, we don't need this test anymore. So post, then login. And then I'm just going to bounce the credentials right back to the client side again on login. So confirmation success, and then data, and then rec, or just credentials is fine. So now we have a login route that we can use as well. So let's go ahead and run that guy through. Let's see. In our auth container, we have register, and I'm going to create another form right beneath it. Or maybe we don't need another form. It doesn't seem like it's really necessary. So let's do register or login. And then we'll just create another button. Login. And let's see how that looks. Okay. With some padding on the right. And then obviously we need a new function. Instead of register, we want a login function. And then I'm going to do the whole prevent default. Console login. Let's see how that looks. Yes, by virtue of React Native. So I've in the past 6 months I did a combo iOS Android project. They wanted cross-platform, so that's why we did React Native on that. but it wasn't a pure Android project. So that's the answer to that question. So if I do that and then that, now I get that. Great. So gonna do the same validation. So I'm gonna create a separate function, validate credentials. How's that? Credentials. How do I like React Native? So I like it because it's React and it's a comfortable environment. The problem I have with it is that it coming from an iOS native background. So I did iOS native for like 4 years, well, professionally for 3, and then on my own for an additional 1 or 2 years. I got quite good at just regular iOS, Swift and Objective-C and Xcode and all that stuff. I just got pretty good at it. So let's see, email. So I found myself a little bit hamstrung by the iOS React Native like environment, I guess. It felt like I was running in quicksand. It's the best way I can put it. So I liked it for what it was meant to do. And if I had no iOS background at all, then I would love React Native. I would be like, this is the bee's knees. But coming from an iOS background, especially having done it for several years, I found that the React Native experience was is a bit of a hindrance, So it's a little bit frustrating. That's not an indictment of React Native. That wouldn't be fair, right? It's just more because I already had some experience. So with iOS regular, like for such a long time. So it just felt like I was deliberately putting myself at a disadvantage. I mean, I didn't feel like it. I was. That's exactly what was happening. So, yeah, it was a little bit frustrating. I guess the best way I can describe is, oh, would I say it's less performant? Yes, hands down. Yeah, that's no question on that. I should read these questions without just answering them directly, because if you're watching this video without reading the chat, you'll just be like, why is he just going off on these random tangents? Someone's asking on the chat whether or not I think React Native is less performant than just doing it on regular Swift or Xcode, and yeah, to me the answer is yes. So, all right, so I created a separate function to validate the attributes, so I can just test it right now. An email. Password. All right, and then I can just do that again in the login. Same functions. That's good. So now I can just reload that, and then missing email, missing password. All right, so that's done. So now let's create a login function. So login credentials. It's kind of weird because iOS is still like probably the strongest thing I'm at. Like I'm probably strongest in iOS than I am in any other area of coding. But as I say in my videos, my like regular talks where I'm not doing any coding, pretty much all of my decisions are driven by the market demand. So if there's no demand for what I'm recording a video on, I just don't record the video. So right now, regular native iOS, I mean, it's not to say that there's no demand. That wouldn't be entirely accurate, but the demand is much higher for just general web dev and for React, Redux, React Native, and GraphQL, like you said. So I just have to do whatever the demand is, right? So it would be foolish of me to sort of shove, like, it would be like creating React iOS videos in Objective-C. Um, that'd just be really dumb. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So uh, that's the thinking there. So, I mean, not to say I'm bad at, React Redux. Obviously, I'm pretty comfortable with that too. But see here, log in. So now we hooked it up to this endpoint right here. And right now, just like before, it's just sort of boomeranging the credentials right back to the client side. So, there's nothing actually persisting or anything like that. So let's test this guy out. So it's really just the same thing. So we can just do this. Let's try it. Test 1, 2, 3. Log in, log in. All right. Easy peasy. So that's 75. And then if we go to the user reducer, what's the constant we use for that? So we used user logged in, right? So where is the action for that? Yeah, user logged in. So let's register that constant inside the reducer. I don't think we have one for that. So we're going to want to do case and then user logged in. And then right now we're just going to do a console log and then return new state. And then just because I did not see this console log show up, obviously it didn't exist. So I just want to make sure that the reducer is successfully capturing it as well. Otherwise, nothing matters. All right, so this is what I'm looking for right here. User reducer line 31, and we have an undefined key right there. So let's make sure that doesn't cause any problems. So same thing here. And then let's do that. All right. Now we can test it again. Test. So again, we're testing the login here. User logged in, and then we're getting it on the component side as well. So we are good to go. And then we should go ahead and set the current user to that payload like so. And then that's pretty much it. All right. So now if I do test and then, oops, sorry, 1, 2, 3, this should change to test. So there it is. All right, done. So that's successfully confirmed. So now what we want to do is actually connect the login functionality. So let's get rid of these right here. All right, so here we want to find the user using the email address. So we're validating again, geez. All right, so let's just create a validation function. Const validate credentials. All right, and then basically it's just going to be these again. So password. Rename to, you're gonna have to give me a specific line number and a file so I know exactly what you're referring to. And then once you do that, I can give you a more accurate answer to your question. All right, so now we have another validate function. So const missing credentials if missing. right there, and then missing two upper case. Now we can get rid of all these. Okay, line 26. That's okay, so that's not, we're not converting res to anything there. We're calling a function on the res object. So this is right here, line 26, reading two. We're not converting the response object to a JSON object. This is a function that we're calling on the res object, which sends a JSON object back to the client side. So you're slightly misinterpreting what's happening here. So that's that. Okay, so then now I can use this validate function in the login as well. Right here. Okay, so now that we have that, let's grab the email. So credentials, email to lowercase. Now we have to lowercase it here, and we should definitely trim it as well. The reason we have to lowercase it is because if you look at the actual profile here, you'll see that the email is automatically lowercase in the database. So if you don't do that, the fetches won't work. It'll be like a false negative. Like, so yeah, you get the idea. So controller profile. And if we look at the controller profile, we have a get option and a get by ID option. So we don't have the ID, we have the email. So we do get, and then we pass in the email, and then email, right? And then that returns a promise. And then, actually always gonna go with data on this. And then here, now this is an important, actually I'm just gonna handle the failure first because that's the easiest. So just throw back a failure message and that's that. Okay, now, important to understand here is that the profile controller runs a general query using these params against the Mongoose ORM, right? And that'll always return an array, no matter what. It might be an array of 0, 1, or a million. So really, this is an array. So we want to treat it like an array. Actually, I'm going to call this profile, so I changed my mind back. So this is if we have to check the array. So if length equals 0, this means the profile that we're looking for is not found. So we want to throw new error, and then profile not found. And then I'll just directly throw it down to this guy right here, that block of code. And then const data profile equals. And for now, I'm just going to assume the first element of the array. And then now we send back the success block. So success data, I think I spelled that right. Okay, and then, so now when we go back to our auth container, we can now, since we're running this promise client side, right, we can, or component side, we can throw human readable responses, right? So here we can just throw an error and then error message. And then for now, I'm just going to leave this console log as is. So I'm going to reload. Just going to check my Webpack as well because it's possible I made a mistake. And then reload, and then I'm going to log in as a user who doesn't exist, right? So there's only one user in the back end, and it's this guy right here. So right now I should get that error. Ah, damn it, I just signed up. Damn it, sorry. So let me reload, and now I got to do this. And then, okay, so this user doesn't exist. And profile not found. So auth 75. So there we go. And that is this guy right here. So let's see. We're getting confirmation fail, message profile not found. So let's see. This is a little bit sloppy. I am going to go to the reducer. And we're getting this right here. No, we're not. HTTP client. So really what should be happening is the confirmation check should be in here, and it should throw a reject, some sort of error, if the API is returning an error, which it currently is. So this is currently causing some sloppiness in the code. Right now I'm debating whether or not I want to actually go through the extra step of fixing all this. Um, I have an idea. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create another client called the utils touch API client. Export that guy. API client. I'm going to take the HTTP client and just copy and paste that over into the API client. And then I'm going to head over to our actions. And we're going to import the API client. And instead of HTTP client, we're going to use the API client. And let me just run that test again right now. Normally when I add a new file, I rerun the build. Now let me explain why I'm doing this. Is because the reason I'm hesitant to really mess with the HTTP client is because this is meant to be a generic HTTP request handler, regardless of what the backend, the server, how it's configured. So I can use this for any backend, and I want to keep it that way. Whereas the API client, I'm going to start adding some custom logic here that's specific only for our API, so I can check confirmation keys and things like that. Thank you, I appreciate your questions and your feedback. I'll be trying to do this on a more regular basis from now on. I don't know where you're located, but I'm going to try and do this at 10 p.m. Eastern on a regular basis because I think that's sort of the best compromise, at least for the United States. So hopefully you can watch that. Okay, so going back to this, I'm now using the API client, which right now is a direct copy of the HTTP client. So, there's no really different. So, okay, so everything still works, right? Now what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to add some custom logic in the API client that's only specific for our API. So here we can do all of our tests for, not like unit testing, but like confirmation checks. So let's see here. Let's do that here. So console log body. Okay, let's say post. So here in the API client, we're getting a confirmation fail and then a message associated with that. So what we can do is we can check that confirmation. So if confirmation equals success, we can reject with an error. And that should be in the res.body message. So you see here now we're using keys and situations that are pertinent only to our API. So that's the reason why I'm reluctant to do this logic inside the HTTP client. But now that it's in here, we're getting the logic we should be getting. Now that's going to require some changes inside of our reducers though. So let's, oh, and then it's always going to be in the data key, I believe. So res.body. All right, so I'm going to run this check inside the post, which I'm doing obviously, the put, the delete, and the gets. Okay, and then yeah, we'll leave it like that for now. We can just leave it. So here is a profile who does not exist. Now we're getting profile not found in the auth 79. So this is the error I wanted to see rather than running the confirmation checks here. That's much more better code, to be honest. It's much more appropriate in terms of its architecture. So hopefully that makes sense. I would say that's the most confusing decision I've made so far today in terms of why I created a separate API client as opposed to using the HTTP client. But this is considered superior architecture. Um, the only question I'm leaving behind, I'm wondering now, is whether or not I should just defer to the data key every single time, which I think that's all I'm doing. So let me just check the API route. So as you can see, I'm being a little bit more deliberate with my decision-making process because I actually think, I kind of want to make a real project out of this. I don't want to half-ass this one because I feel like it's actually a pretty good idea. So I am going to defer to the data key inside the API client for the payload every single time. So in these resolves, I'm going to do .data. Okay, and then what that means is inside the user reducer, everywhere it says action.data.data, that's no longer needed. So we can do, I'm just going to do one full, like, find and replace, like that. Okay, and that should take, now we're having a little bit cleaner code organization. It's also worth pointing out that I'm making these decisions early. Once you start seeing little things sort of pile up, you want to nip it in the bud, because if you sort of leave it off until later, uh, the mistakes grow. I mean, that's technical debt, right? So hopefully you can kind of see, like I'm making sort of, I wouldn't call them hard decisions, but it slows me down. It's not something I necessarily want to do right now for the sake of moving forward, for the sake of progress, but I know that I have to because it's going to cause a lot of headaches down the road if I don't. So this is now much more, cleanly organized. And then inside the user reducer, we no longer have that like data.data issue. We now have two profiles in the back end, I believe, one mistake and one that's supposed to be there. So now let's go back to my original test, which is we try logging in as the existing user. And here it is, data auth 73, and that's the person I logged in as, and that's this right here, the success block. So it worked. One thing I didn't see was the user reducer, this guy right here. So let's see what's happened. This didn't happen, so that's a problem. So let's go ahead and console log this until it shows up. So let's see what's going on. Right. Okay, so now we don't need these success checks. You see that? Because this is now happening in the API client. And again, that's much better architecture. This logic shouldn't be happening in the reducer anyway. So this is sloppiness. It was a workaround. So at first I was sort of taking shortcuts, but then the technical debt already started to pile up. So I needed to, I kind of decided, all right, I don't want this to continue. So let me just clean it up right now before it gets too hairy. So now this is much cleaner. it's not doing the API confirmation checks in the reducer. It shouldn't be happening here anyway, and so that has now been taken care of. So let me just do one more quick check. And I did that by mistake, so beautiful. And just to be super certain, let's do one more check. I'm going to register this time. Very nice. Everything is still in working order. All of these worked. Let's get rid of that actions test. We can get rid of that. And then we can keep moving. So let's see here. Inside the auth route. Auth. Bear in mind, the login didn't really do anything other than find the user, right? So now we have to actually check the password. So here's the profile with the corresponding email. So let's just grab the password. So const password, credentials, password, if profile, if password is not the same as profile password. Obviously, that's the wrong password, so we just send back an error message. Error. Incorrect or password. Okay, and that'll throw the code down to the error block. So now we can test that. One at turbo360.co, and I'm entering the wrong password on purpose. Incorrect email, wrong password. And then here we have the success block. And before anyone mentions it, I already know that this should be encrypted and all that stuff, and we should be using some encryption library for that. So I get that. I'm just getting stuff set up. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe that's the right password. And there we go. We have the current user logged in, getting our console logs. I'm just going to get rid of those now because they serve their purpose. So let's get rid of that. And then auth 73. Okay. And all right, so let's see here. So, I mean, we set up the basic like user sign up and then log in, obviously. So, I think for now I'm going to cut it off. It's been about an hour and a half, so it's a good start. I mean, there's a lot more I want to do, obviously, but you know, this can go on all night. So I think I'm going to cut it off right here. And then tomorrow, what we're going to do is set up the next page, which is where the user's profile page, where users can actually start posting links to their profile. That way, other user, and then finding other users on the page on the site, and then other users can see. So this, once the login is successful, this should redirect to a sort of a profile, your profile page, where you can start posting links. So kind of like your own personal Reddit page, and then other people can check out your page and see what links you find are cool. So I think I'm going to do that tomorrow, or get that going tomorrow. So yeah, that's it. Hope to see you tomorrow night. Thanks.